Hi, my friends. Welcome to Inside the Minds of Authors. I'm DC Gomez, your host, and also an indie author. I'm thrilled you're joining me today for another fun interview with a passionate author. We're going to kick off this show with an exciting reading, so let's get started.
My name is Bonne Bartron, and I'm reading a chapter from my book, Whispers. Chapter 5. It's hard to look back on it all now, knowing what I know. I still dream that I somehow transport myself to that moment on the ride and fucking demand more information from my three nieces. I don't know what I could have asked to unlock the story without the whole journey, but I should have gotten more than a name. I believed the girls. I always did. It just didn't make sense. Their story was too veiled in innocence, too confused. My deepest regret is that I didn't share the story that they told me with either of my sisters. I kept my word to my nieces. I let their fears color my own decisions, and I will never be able to change that fact. If there is one thing adults should ignore, it is a child's hesitation to do the right thing. Facing danger head on is a skill that has to be forged. No person has it innately, not when it comes to real peril. When we got back to the Airbnb, my sister started drinking, and I told them I was going to do some research for a case, taking my extra hard pina colada downstairs to the infamous playroom. I stayed up all night Googling. I started with the name, the only real piece of information I had, Mr. Tasty Treats. I'd never heard of him before, and the name neither inspired fear in my heart, nor did it seem that original. But I was shocked to see how fleshed out the lore behind him was. I used my laptop to read articles and creepypastas about him. Some posts were extraordinarily juvenile, painful to try to decipher, but others were frighteningly vivid. Around 3 a.m., I had the gaming computer running through a YouTube playlist I quickly queued up from a cursory search of the name Tasty Treats. My laptop was overheating, and I had a fattening file on my desktop of relevant selections of alleged sightings of the creature. I was doing that thing I do, obsessing, big time. I love a good mystery, and research is a perfect use of my single-track mind. Inside the main folder was a subfolder containing every artist rendition I could find of the creature. They were all a little different. This one had long, pointed shoes. That one was depicted wearing a big pilgrim buckle clog and pirate pants. Most of them had kind of a crucible time period clothes or something vaguely steampunk, always with a long, clean apron and a chef's hat that covered up his eyes. That was one of the main things they all agreed on. His blonde hair was long and always tucked under a chef's hat of some kind, with fringe that covered most of his face. His hooked, thin nose poked through slightly, and only his bottom teeth and clean-shaven jawline could be seen when he spoke. There were conflicting tales of Mr. Tasty Treats everywhere I looked, and it took me a minute to realize the results contained some professional-level short films, as well as on-camera footage. Most of it was obviously staged, but others claimed to be actually citizen-recorded, and some of it was pretty convincing. The veracity of each video appeared to be the subject of a lot of debate in the comments on each of the endless streams of clips. Users vehemently insisted on their point of view, whether it could actually be a true Mr. Tasty Treat sighting, or if it was just another hoax. I couldn't believe the venom in some of the posts. There were even commenters who believed Mr. Tasty Treats was behind a disappearance in their town or of people they knew. A few clicks later, I found a bunch of fan sites. There was one site that claimed to know how to get Mr. Tasty Treats to call an enemy's phone, but warned that if the person actually did it, there's a real chance the intended victim would disappear forever. That unnerved the shit out of me. So, of course, I sent an email to the address provided and asked for access to the phone number. Every time I thought I had Mr. Tasty Treats pinned down, another piece of information would fly out of left field and send me spiraling down a different rabbit hole. I was trying to find out the creator of the original story, figure out the year Mr. Tasty Treats was first mentioned, find out anything at all besides the thousands of fanfics and terrified children's stories I couldn't help but get sucked into reading. It was nearing dawn when I found something that dated all the way back to 2003, when I was in middle school. There was a mention of Mr. Tasty Treats kidnapping two girls, a few years younger than me, while they were playing in the woods outside of Bar Harbor, Maine. Apparently, they had posted on their MySpace that they had just been contacted by someone named Mr. Tasty Treats days before they disappeared. The strange part was that I also found a police report that seemed to correspond exactly to the case. I put that case in a news subfolder, Actual Disappearances. I'd suss out the facts later. But that was a real lead. It was around that time that I started thinking the whole story could make a good movie concept. Since I am a supportive girlfriend, despite the lack of evidence in my story thus far, I sent Kent a quick email asking him if he'd ever heard of the creature before. I also sent him a copy of my folder of tidbits and a few links to some of the more unnerving footage. Kent's got an incredible eye, and it helps that he is a director of photography. So I was really hoping that he'd take a look at the footage and tell me how to spot the fakes. I'd even be cool with a little mansplaining about how one of the more disturbing clips was achieved. It was made to look like a security cam video of a little girl asleep in her crib. There was a frame of static. Then the shadowy baker appeared. He crouched on the windowsill outside the room and ran his hand down the window to unlock it and push it open. He grabbed the child and looked up at the security camera before jumping out of the window. I rewound it to that moment, playing it in slow motion. His hand was over the child's nose and mouth, and her saucer eyes were full of fear as she made eye contact with the camera. I paused the clip. That kid was one hell of an actress. I heard the birds, but I had pulled the Venetian blinds down over the solitary basement window earlier for obvious reasons. So I was practically blinded by the sun when I finally walked upstairs. It must have been 7 a.m. because Emily was already standing at the coffee maker. She jumped out of her skin and spilled grounds everywhere when I entered the kitchen from the wrong direction. Christ on a cracker, you scared the piss out of me. You can't do that to a mom. Emily was genuinely mad at me. I could tell she really had peed herself a little. I tried super hard not to laugh, but failed miserably. You finished making the coffee. I'm going to go shower. What were you doing down there anyway, vampire? She didn't wait for my answer. She went upstairs and had the water running before I could even compose myself. I snorted with laughter as I finished making the coffee and swept up the grounds. I was tired, but honestly, I don't think I get as tired as most adults. I mean, I can always sleep in and catch back up. Maybe just the knowledge of that helps me pull the hours I do from time to time. That night was by no means a unique evening for me. I do crazy sleepless cram sessions when I'm added to a pre-existing case or when a new game drops, especially if it's from software Bethesda. I know, but I never said I was cool. And if assumptions were made, that's not on me. Amalia came down the stairs next. Her eyes were puffy and she was a little swollen in the throat area. Morning. You ready for some coffee? I asked her, handing her a cup already made to her specs, a drizzle of cream only. She shook her head and croaked. No thanks. I'm not feeling great. I might need to go lay back down. You look pretty pale yourself. I hope we didn't catch something. Concerned for me, she reached her mom hand out to check my forehead temperature against her own. It made me smile. I just haven't slept yet. I fell into a dark corner of the internet and Emily caught me on my way up to bed. Oh no, you went full on spacey? As she laughed, I could hear the rawness of her throat, but calling me by my childhood nickname was a low blow. Careful there, sis. Chortling like that might make you lose your voice, and we wouldn't want that now, would we? We both laughed pretty hard, and her voice sounded like a wooden box lid scraping closed. Emily reappeared, head wrapped in a towel, and helped herself to a huge cup of coffee, taking a considerable sip before she began to speak. Okay, now what the living hell were you doing up all night? I didn't know how to answer her. I had made a promise to the girls that I wouldn't share any information that wasn't really important, and the last thing I wanted to do is make them feel like they couldn't confide in me. On the other hand, I was itching to tell them both about the crazy story I'd discovered, so I decided to read my sisters in without letting them know where I'd heard of MTT in the first place. On a side note, I had just learned that Mr. Tasty Treats is all over 4chan, but they refer to him as MTT only. Figuring out that keyword ended up unlocking so many other stories and links that I got overwhelmed and decided sleep would be a good choice. I also needed to make sure the nieces didn't walk in and get the wrong idea, so I beckoned my sisters downstairs and plugged in my earbuds so the sound wouldn't give us away if the girls woke up. Right out the gate, I played the video that haunted me, with the static and the baker who apparently uses telekinesis to enter the girls' room. Emily started protesting instantly, pulling the earbud from her ear. Nope. I hate stuff like this. It's too real. She handed the earbud to Amalia, who didn't say anything but put it in her exposed ear. She was watching the screen intently. I whispered to my sister, "It really does look genuine, doesn't it?" She was angry with me. "You don't know how scary that is for a mother. That's my worst fucking nightmare." "It's like Slenderman or Momo or something," Amalia reported without looking away from the screen. She paused it just before the little girl looked into the lens and then turned to me. Is this from a movie? Totally possible. Some of the footage I found is, for sure. I mean, not a Hollywood movie, but it is a pretty common subject of short films, cosplays, and stuff. And I think some foreign filmmakers have used some similar looking characters. I've already found so much video of this guy, and it dates back to like when we were kids. But that clip, that's the one that just, I don't know, creeps me out the most. You know about Wrinkles, right? The clown guy? Amalia pulled the earbud from her left ear and let it hang as she continued to sift through my research folder, nodding absent-mindedly as she scanned. I'd never heard of anything like that, but apparently Emily had, and she was instantly in an uproar. He is a twisted fucker, and any parent who would call him, that should be a crime. Legitimately. You know that guy gets off on terrorizing kids. He has to. Why else would he do it? What parent would invite a perverted son of a cock like that into their child's life? Did you see the documentary on him? Amalia asked, clicking through another of my clips in the real footage subfolder in my actual disappearances folder. Emily was visibly red. Oh, yeah. Dustin and I stayed up all night watching it when it first came out. It's no wonder some children turn into such fucked up adults. Okay, so obviously I'm missing a huge part of this. Anyone gonna fill me in? I was getting frustrated. I couldn't help it. I was showing them something, and somehow I was the odd one out again. Emily started in a very matter-of-fact way, like it hurt for her to speak the words that flew rapid fire from her mouth. He's this guy who created a scary online clown monster named Wrinkles. And parents hire him to torment their children when they act out or are being quote-unquote bad. Like a real-life boogeyman, Amalia added. Oh, shit, wow. I didn't know what to say. So he's a real guy, but he pretends to be Wrinkles and actually goes to people's houses? Yeah. Parents pay him to scare their kids. I think it's mostly videos and phone calls, but at least one of them have had him show up at their house. How fucked up is that? There is enough to be afraid of in this world. Who dreams up such a thing, let alone actually makes a hotline? A hotline? You mean people can call him directly? I was starting to see the correlations. I'd signed up for something similar the night before. I'd figured it was more than likely a scam, so I plugged in my Google call number instead of my cell, but now hearing that it could actually be a deranged man in a costume, it got me thinking. The girls said they were going to make a TikTok the other day. I didn't know you let them carry phones. Emily nodded her head. I just started letting them use my old one. It's only for emergencies, and it only gets internet on Wi-Fi. But they make little videos all the time. I think Uncle Kent is a big inspiration for them. I nodded, and Amalia sensed my thoughts. Why do you ask, Stacy? Emily looked at me too, a hint of concern in her eyes. They weren't calling Wrinkles, were they? I didn't even know who Wrinkles was a minute ago. I was just wondering out loud is all, I said, a little more exasperated than I wanted. The possibility of a real person talking to the girls just upped the importance level of the conversation, and I was quickly deciding to tell my sisters everything when we heard the scream ricochet through the house. The world slowed down as we all sprinted for the stairway, shoving each other as we clambered toward the sound. Lana and Morgan were standing behind Rosie, their eyes wide in horror, and Rosie was pointing at the open back door, tears streaking down her little face. He just took her. He took her! Emily screamed at me to stay with Rosie, and she was out the door, running barefoot across the empty yard.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Inside the Minds of Authors. Today we have the amazing Miss Bonne joining us today, and that was a fabulous, intriguing reading. So let's get started. Hi, Madame. How are you today?
Hey, thank you so much for having me on. I am great, watching the sunrise as we speak.
I'm so sorry to wake you up so early in the morning. I tend to forget. There's
Like I said, I didn't go to bed, so I'm a vampire. No worries.
You're dedicated. I'm loving it. I am excited to have you. So we're going to jump right into this. Tell us, what is this book about? Where did it come from? You just read chapter 5, and I'm like, oh God, where are we going with this? So talk to us.
So it's funny. This book really came to me pretty much fully formed. I was just observing a lot of crazy stuff happening in our country. This was about May. I didn't know where a lot of the anger was coming from. People that I've been friends with for years just turning into just hateful people online. Just really shocking. It spun me into a whole conspiracy theory hole. Let's just put it that way. Because I was like, what is going on? So, long story short, after doing a lot of research, I concluded that there were certain stories being told that are actually pretty old in American history. And these stories were being told in such a way that it became very difficult to differentiate between fact and fiction. I'm a fiction writer, I'm a screenwriter first, but I really love telling people truth by using fiction because I find for myself that fiction makes me think in a way that dry or biographies and documentaries don't really fire the same way for me. I sat down and I started working on Whispers. I wrote it in about 3.5 months. But like I said, it was really a fully formed idea. So it's about these sisters, two by blood and one by marriage, who take their kids to like a dream vacation in Orlando, Florida. They are like living it up. They have 4 children with them. And the girls all start talking about this monster that they think is following them. And they're very scared. Like, I mean, just acting very strange. But the moms just think they're just kids making up stories, especially because they're pretty young. The oldest one is 13. Long story short, as you can tell, one of the girls ends up disappearing from the Airbnb that they're renting. And instead of just relying on the authorities, the women take it upon themselves to hunt down the real kidnapper of their daughter, and in the process discover a conspiracy that dates back to before the Constitution.
Oh, wow. This is so exciting. Where genre are you placing this baby in?
Well, it's a bestseller and it's a satire. I bring up that it's a bestseller because it was a bestseller in satire, though I would say that the main genre in it is mystery. It's an interesting place to live because it is definitely satire, but it is also definitely completely a fictional mystery. So I would say those are probably the strongest categories for it.
I like it. That's a great combination. And it's interesting because Mr. Treats, I was like, I want to be very serious, but that's
It's a
Mr.
goofy
Treats?
name, right? It's a
So
goofy
it was
name.
one of those like the whole entire scene has this essence of, like it's building up, and then you go, and Mr. Treats. And I'm like, so like Mr. Giggles, like, should I be serious about this? Are we
Right.
focused? And then she's doing research and was like, oh wow, this could actually happen. This is the kind of stuff you're going, that is creepy in so many different ways.
Right. And sometimes, myths have certain names to make them disarming. And that might be a factor in this. It is, by the way. So I love that
It's
you
a,
picked up on that.
it's a great way to make adults dismiss it. You know what I mean? Just that name alone, you're like, oh, whatever, it's just a kid thing. Nobody really cares
Precisely.
about.
Yes,
We
totally.
we dismiss things that don't sound proper or adultish. So it's kind of like, okay, whatever, you just making up stuff. Why can it be that possibly of a deal? But as the tension continues to escalate, you're going, okay, that just got creepy. What's going on here? Is this a standalone book or you're planning to do a series? What is your take on this?
So it's actually really interesting. Originally, it was going to just be a standalone book, but I do believe that I will very likely begin. Well, I've already started kind of writing it. The truth is like I love these characters, like the women that are our leads in this book. I just love them, and they are based loosely on my own family. It was kind of funny because I started getting requests like immediately from readers, like I want to read the next one with these characters, and I was like, oh man, this is supposed to be a one and done kind of thing. And then like the events of this year have allowed for a whole other level for the next book. So the next book is going to be called Whispers in the Storm.
Ooh.
Yes, and that'll be the sequel to this. And it is, like I said already, in its early form. I'm actually discussing right now if I'm going to do this one next or if I'm going to do a different book next based on a screenplay that I wrote that actually I had a agent reach out to me. This is actually kind of how I fell into book writing too, is a friend's agent reached out to me and asked if I'd be interested in her clients writing books based on my screenplays. And I was like, well, that sounds great. Like, it's always great to have a book for property, this could be great. I sat down and wrote this one, and I was like, I could actually write more of these, especially during COVID. This was a lot of fun. So now I might also be doing that.
This is actually your first book compared to the fact that you have been doing screenplays nonstop. How was the transition from one medium to another? I started as a filmmaker, so all of my books feel like a movie, and everybody goes like, I can visualize it, but I know authors who are trying to do the transition the other way, and it's a lot harder. How was it for you?
I think you nailed it. It's a completely different medium. Screenplays are less about the story and more about the mechanics of getting it done. That being said, the story is the most important part of a screenplay, right? But when you're writing a screenplay, it's all about like knowing who is going to be taking what from your script. So in a script, you have obviously the dialogue, and that's for the actors. But what most people don't realize is the scene setting isn't just so that you can imagine the scene. It's so the production designer knows what scene it is. It's so the locations director knows what kind of location we have. The action in it is not just for the actor. It's also for camera department. So it's really a complex set of instructions written in a way that you can visualize the story as well as understand what's going on in the dialogue. Whereas with a book, it's so cool because it's almost like directing a movie as well as writing a movie. When you write a book, you get to be the writer and the director because you determine what the audience sees through very specific language choice, right? In a book. Whereas with a movie, that's determined by the actual lens of the camera and what we're seeing in the image. It's very exciting for me to get to have the kind of freedom I had in Whispers. I will say that I have heard from many people that it does feel like you're watching something. I'm a very visual person, but I'm also a very like, let's make sure you get it and then move on. I'm not going to dwell for 45 minutes on what like the molding looks like in this room. Like, it's just, does it feed the story? No, then it's out. Like, that's how I go.
That is beautiful because it gives your script, it gives your book a very sense of excitement, and it's always moving. And I think that's the difference with filmmakers is because you have a pace in your head you're trying to keep.
Sure.
There is this sense of like, okay, we need to get to the next thing, we need to be moving, we need to be going, which can be very different if you're a very traditional author who is very busy trying to give you the essence of everything and every piece of that room. Absolutely. While you're going to like, let's get to the point. Like, this is what's happening, then we're moving.
Right.
So it has a different feel.
It does. Yeah, it does. It definitely was something that I've got the bug for now. I'm like, oh my God, because I'm also a director. I'm a screenwriter and a director. So for me, when I write a screenplay in general, I have to take all the directing out of it because if I'm selling it to somebody, which is also something that I do. So if I'm selling my screenplay to somebody else, they can't see it the way I see it, because if they see it the way I see it, then they feel like they're being directed off the page and they're not going to want to pick up that screenplay. So I have to like vanilla up my screenplays all the time, unless I know I'm the one directing it. And then I'm like, and then this, and then this, and then this. But in general, I have to really vanilla up a screenplay. Whereas with this, like, I got to make it exactly the detail I wanted it to be. I got to show you exactly what I wanted you to see and what I didn't want you to see. And that was something that was really, really special. Don't get me wrong, with COVID, it's not like I have a lot of choices when it comes to the film industry right now. But that being said, I really feel like this was like a blessing, even though COVID has been a nightmare and 2020 has been a nightmare. I feel like discovering this medium has really been a really exciting experience for me. Very grateful.
It is a whole different world, and you're truly creating this universe that you can paint whichever way you like. And you can take your readers on this journey that, while filmmaking is very specific, so
Right.
you're creating this piece of work, and some people's like, yeah, this is what I got. And you can be like, I'm sure that's not in the book. Like, I didn't write that. But right. I'm still going to get it.
That's so true. That's such a good point.
You have experienced that. Like, I've had conversations and people tell you things and you're like, that's in the book. Like, I wrote that. Like, that's in there. Are you sure? Like, yeah. Like,
I've had that with movies more, where like people will see something and they'll be like, oh my God, when you did this and then you reverse back over here, was that you trying to tell us da 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 about the character? And I'm like, yes, it was. It totally wasn't. Yes, it was. Is that what you took away from it? Then yes, I am that brilliant. And then like I laugh, I'm like, oh my God, that's so awesome.
it is amazing what your audience and the readers take, that you're going, I didn't see it, but okay. Like, I have had people make correlations between one book and the other, and I'm like, huh, I'm excited. This is officially your book because it's obviously not mine.
Ooh, I love that line. Like what you just said, that's a beautiful line. This is officially your book because it's obviously not mine. That's what I think I love about the books the most. I agree. Like, it's not about me at this point. If nobody ever saw my face again or heard my voice again, like, okay, this book belongs to you. And I love that.
It is absolutely their family, their property. And I think usually we have to be very careful how we treat our babies, because while we write them, it's technically theirs.
That is very real. Wow.
Yeah, it's their world, and you're just carrying it to them. But once they read it, it becomes their own little bubble and property, and it's their family. Like, they brought it home, they made a connection. You better not kill them all because you're going to hear about it. You're like, oh, my bad. I'm sorry. What was I thinking?
One of my characters. Yes, I love that. I love that.
You get those messages. You're like, oh, my bad. I'm sorry. I won't do that again. Do you have an audience in mind? Do you have a target that you said, okay, this book would be amazing for this group of people?
If I'm being honest, I specifically wrote it for the 55% of white women who voted against themselves this year, because it is a journey into understanding that your experience isn't everyone else's experience, and that other people's experiences are just as important as your own, even if you don't see them. And so, truthfully, I wrote it this way, like as a mystery and this whole thing, in the hopes that I could explain something in a way that would not offhandedly offend, but would get the pressure cooker in their brains starting. Because, like, I know a lot of these people. Unfortunately, I grew up in a small town that has a lot of, they're just not exposed to a lot of different kinds of people. It's a small town in the middle of nowhere. I know that these are good people. They don't see because they don't have to see, because they don't want to see. I feel like right now it's important for everybody to do whatever little piece that we can to try to help other people in our country see each other a little more clearly.
That is powerful. I like the way you portrayed. I think we're all a product of our environment. And sometimes we do have to be patient with either side. It's one of those things we come in to understand people, but by helping them. I like that. Like, let's do our part for everybody to be seen and to be heard without being judged. I think that's the part that we tend to be. We want to judge them and want to pass this acclamations and things instead of just seeing them, just seeing heard. So that is beautiful.
Well, thank you. It really comes down to people like you, though, and like all the people who have really rallied behind it to like spread the message, because it's hard to get a book seen in COVID, let me tell you, but we've been very fortunate. We've had a whole big group of people rally behind it. And I think people understand that like this is the kind of thing that like whatever you can do it. I can write. So that's what I did. You can talk to people. So that's what you do. You know what I mean? Like, we all have something that we can do to like contribute right now. And the important thing is that we just show up and contribute. And everybody else is going to help make the rest of that happen. Like, that's what I'm really seeing right now. It's just all of us saying, okay, I'm here. I want to help. This is the one thing I have. It might be tiny, 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 but at least it's something I can contribute.
Absolutely love it. And you nailed it. I think when COVID started, I sent a message to my newsletter because I felt extremely helpless. Because in my mind, I was like, I'm just a writer. I'm just doing this. What can I do?
Yeah.
But just that connection with the readership, just connecting with our people and understanding our tribe and telling them, while we right now might feel we don't have a lot to give, that piece makes a difference and it's a huge impact into people's lives.
And
So
especially when we put them together, right? Like when we all like join together and like lift each other up and like amplify each other's voices, like that's what it's about, is like, okay, cool. Here's my little piece of the jigsaw puzzle. And you got yours. Oh, look, they match. Right.
it makes a difference. It makes such an impact. I think we're spending too much time focusing on the things we can't control. And there's a whole
Yes.
bunch of that. So when we could focus on the things that we can't and we bring people together and we bring this community together, it is absolutely amazing the things that have happened. Like I have this incredible community of authors that I'm just like, how did I get so lucky to meet you guys? How did that happen? And like meeting new people on the podcast, I was like, oh, I have the best job ever. Like amazed.
Well, and it's also the energy you put out, right? You attract those people. Like that's what you do. And like it is true though. I do think that we're all getting drawn to each other a lot more right now than we ever have before. It's weird how isolation just has become a magnet for like a lot of really awesome people. I don't know about you. I've had a ton of people show up in my life recently that are just amazing. So little gifts among the crazy.
So there's a post that I keep sharing with everybody. It says, your vibe will attract your tribe. So whatever that vibe you bring is a tribe that's going to come to you. So most people's like, oh my God, I only have negative people. It's like, you might want to think about this. Like, really?
Ooh. Ooh.
How long have you been writing for?
Oh, wow. That's funny. I've been writing since I was a tiny kid. I wrote my first book when I was in kindergarten, actually. I had my mom write most of the words because my handwriting was terrible. I've always had really stupid hands. Like they just wouldn't do what I wanted them to do. Otherwise, I'd have been a great painter. And instead, I'm a very mediocre painter. That being said, like I've been obsessed with the written word since I was a kid, probably because my mom was dyslexic. So growing up, she read to me like constantly because she was terrified that I would have the same experience that she had growing up. She always felt like she couldn't ask questions, et cetera. Like she just felt like she, was dumb, even though she wasn't. She was just dyslexic. Because of that, like she really made me just love books. Like it was my favorite. It was like my comfort. It was like my special place. And I started writing a lot whenever I was younger, and I'd actually have friends come over to my house and I'd be like, we're going to have a sleepover. And then we'd end up making movies with my parents' video camera. And they did not get very happy with me. Like 12 hours later, and my friends are like, can we do something else? And I'm like, no, get the line right.
You were an evil dictator.
I wouldn't say evil. I was the epitome of a bossy girl, though, for sure. Like, for sure. And I have absolutely no qualms with that description.
So you were meant to be a director from the beginning. There's no doubts about it. Everybody who knows you, like, yeah, we saw that coming.
Yeah, like they thought I was either going to be a lawyer or a director. I almost said dictator because you said dictator. Director, dictator, I mean.
You do know you're technically a little dictator on set. You might not be evil, but you're still a little dictator. You can do it with a smile.
My crew does call me the general. And I love it. Like they call me the general to my face, even. I freaking love it.
Embrace it. Just take it all in. It's like, this is meant to be. This is who I'm supposed to be.
Exactly.
You get ideas from everywhere. Normally, how are you inspired? How do you carry them through from idea to paper?
Great question. I am one of those weirdos who have like extraordinarily vivid dreams. And my subconscious is way more creative than my conscious mind is. I have dreamt up some truly terrifying horrors, some like really epic, beautiful, sweeping shots that I woke up and I was like, I wonder if I can make a jib that is a crane. Let me see. Like, I mean, literally these things. How did I achieve that in my dream? It was such a perfect shot. Was that a drone? I mean, literally. I know. The nerd level goes deep here, okay? I don't know what you were told, but this is the nerd level that runs deep.
Love it. I'm connecting to a whole level. It's like, oh yeah, my kind of girl. Let's go.
Yes. But I will say that like, it's strange sometimes what inspires me. Sometimes it's what's in the collective unconscious and like what people are talking about that like starts making me think a different way about something. And then like, I'll follow that down a rabbit hole. But when it comes to like getting something on the page, to be honest, like it takes a really good idea for it to make it to the page. Because I have probably 1,000 ideas every day, like little ideas, nothing enormous and ground shaking, but little ideas. In general, I'll like look at it, examine it, and let it like just toss it into the barrel. Like, maybe one day. I don't know. Maybe there's a facet to this that can go into something later, right? But in general, like they just get tossed into the delete barrel in my brain. But if there is an idea that instead of being able to examine it and look at the facets, like I just start realizing it's like still buried and I have so much more to uncover. And then I can't stop uncovering it, and like it lives in my head, and it's almost like it haunts me. Like it's almost like all of a sudden there's this thing that like is just taking over my brain. When that happens, then I know it has to get on the page. And the problem with when that happens is as soon as that actually clicks in where I get to that point, I can't focus on anything else until it's on the page. So it's probably one of the reasons I am such a fast writer, is because like I have to get it on the page. And I mean, obviously it's from repetition too. Like my first screenplay took me 6 months to write the first draft of. So like, repetition gets you faster too, for sure. But I think it really comes down to, I mean, my boyfriend, everybody in my life will tell you this. When I am working on a new project, I am only about 20% present, because the rest of my processing power is literally living in that world. And things that like people will never see on screen or ever know about the characters, like it all starts writing itself until it's a fully formed universe. And then all I have to do is show up and allow the universe to happen. And that's how I write, is show up and like know who my characters are, know who like is going to bring me into this world and what the world is. And then I show up in the world and I play. And that play shows up in words on my page.
Absolutely a beautiful description of the writing process, and is such a creative way of doing it. And you do spend a lot of time immersed in this bubble before you put it on the page, which is beautiful. A lot of authors and a lot of aspiring authors ask, where do I start? And I think the part is they don't give themselves enough time to dwell and to experiment and to live in this bubble. They want the bubble to come up. They want it on the page. And I'm like, you might need to go on a date with these characters, spend some time, go on a date with them, go hang out with them. And then you slowly can put them on the page. So the fact that you know these details and you allow yourself to get immersed in this universe is beautiful. I love your process.
Thank you. It's fun to observe from afar, I'm sure. But in my real life, my poor boyfriend's like, he bought a refrigerator for downstairs, so he did not have to come upstairs and get in my way. Okay. Because like he'd come upstairs and I'd be like,
no.
Yeah. By the way, for those who are listening in podcasts, I literally would slow turn with an evil death stare in my eyes toward the stairway. Like, what the hell are you doing? And he, baby, I'm so hungry. And I'm like, order something from downstairs then. So that being said, it's very beautiful to observe from a distance, but you do not want to be in my house when that is going down.
Only if you try not to eat the rest of their lives should not come and visit, because you might be hungry for a minute. Like,
Precisely.
My heart goes out to your boyfriend.
He got a fridge for downstairs. He's got crackers in his office. Okay, he's fine.
His love where he's like, I'll commit to have my own space till you're done.
I know.
Just so I don't die.
We've been together 8 years. Like, we both are pretty good about being aware of the other. But I will say this one specifically as a book, like in general, I write anywhere from like 90 pages to 115 pages. That's a screenplay, right? I can write a screenplay inside a week if it's already there. I'm talking about like after I've entered the world, like the marination has already happened. After I've entered the world, it can take me like a week, 3 weeks, sometimes a month at the most. It took me a month for this last one I did, but I also had to go to New Orleans and like really immerse myself in New Orleans for it. So it really depends. For him, like usually he doesn't have to tiptoe around me for more than like, a couple weeks max, like maybe a month. This time it was straight. The book is 322 pages and like I wrote it fairly quickly, and like I'd try to take a single day off every week to just really try to like get away from it. So that was like the one day a week that he didn't have eggshells stuck to his feet, Yeah, poor guy. He's pretty great.
I have a feeling he likes the filmmaker more than he likes the author.
He does. He actually knows that being a director is actually a lot more time consuming. I just can do more than one thing at once when I'm directing because, like, unless we're in production, like in pre-production, however, I am a nightmare. I can't have anyone talking to me because I'm in pre-production. Like, I'm usually getting all the, marching orders to everybody and doing interview, meeting, da 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 da, all the pre-production craziness. Interviewing the new, are you going to be my production designer? Let's find out, I definitely think that he thinks that the book writing process is simpler. And it is true. It's because movies take so much longer to get done, especially as a director. Like as a screenwriter, no, you just like write it and hand it off and bye-bye. You know what I mean? Good luck with all that. Let me know if you need a rewrite, like super easy shit. But when you're the director, I'm part of a project from financing on. I usually am in the financing meeting and I'm usually the one pitching the movie alongside the producer. It's a marathon with a movie. This book, I mean, I got this out in less time than it took me to put out like a short film. You know what I mean? Like, I was like, oh, really? I'm done. Like, I'm not expecting that to be every time, don't get me wrong, because I know it was like a special book. Like, I really do feel like it was gifted to me. Like, I feel like someone needed to write it. And I just like kind of got the lucky dice roll, where it was like, ooh, it's me? Okay, cool. I'll do this one, I don't expect them all to be like that. This book was definitely, knock on wood, easier than producing a movie for sure.
Also takes a lot less people to produce. Let's be honest.
That's exactly right.
You don't need an entire army to put a book together. You can actually concentrate on your characters and this world within the confines of your house.
That's exactly right. Now, I did, of course, organize the photo shoot and, it's all original images and stuff. I did have 2 different editors go work on it and a formatter and da-da-da-da. But even still, that's, less than a documentary skeleton crew. Come on.
Oh, yeah.
You don't even need a script for that. Come on.
This is tiny. This is a whole different scale.
Exactly.
Different concept put together. What was the lesson you learned upon taking this project compared to everything else you have done?
Ooh. Well, I will say that you really did nail it when you said that the small crew thing, that it's really enjoyable to be able to be the entire timeline instead of waiting on other people. And don't get me wrong, I love working in film. I do. I love every part of collaborating with these amazing artists, because that's really what filmmaking is just collaboration with a bunch of top level artists, everyone from the actors to the lighting people or the greatest lighting people in the world. You know what I mean? Everybody is so high level. So I love that. But it is really, really nice to be able to say something and not have somebody else try to tell you how they think the audience is going to react to it. I'll be honest, there's a lot in this that I was scared to write, especially because I am a white woman. So I didn't want to make any assumptions on anybody else's experience at all. But I also knew there were things that I needed to mention as a white woman to other white women as well. Listen up, ladies. We got some self-looking into to do. So there were parts that I was definitely a little bit nervous to walk in there. Is this really my story to tell? Is this something for me? Should I be saying these things? And then I realized yeah, we all need to be saying these things. Americans are Americans and we all need to be taking care of each other, period. That's it. I'll tell you that's probably the thing I learned from the book the most is trust the mission and try to be as understanding and get feedback from people that you trust that have a closer experience, because obviously no one's going to be exactly like the person in the book because it's a character, but somebody who has a closer experience who can help you make sure that you have the right tone. Don't get in your own way. Don't put up blocks that aren't there. Be honest, be real, and write from a place where you're telling the most authentic truth that you can possibly tell, and walk away. That was the lesson I learned. Okay, here it is. Okay, okay, I'm not going to let my fear stop me on this. Okay, here we go. Here we go.
One of the things you nail is being authentic as a writer, but you're very vulnerable as a writer. And I don't think people understand that because there's so much of your soul that goes into these books from so many different perspectives. So when you decided, I need to get out of my way, let my fears get out of the way, that is huge. And many people never get to the point of publishing for the simple fact that it is those thoughts in the back of their heads that hold them back. So it is a very vulnerable place. That is a huge lesson.
And it's fantastic too, because like, I don't think I'd have been able to learn that lesson in my industry, but I do think that this lesson will carry over to my industry. That was something that was really special for me because you usually have so much feedback when it comes to a movie, especially if you're a lady. Just FYI, like you get all the feedback, even the feedback from the gaffer. It's something that will make me stronger as a filmmaker and make me keep my foot down and be like, no, this is the right way to do it. Like, this is the right story to tell. Like I said, I mean, I feel very grateful for this book, which I know sounds silly because I wrote it, but I do. Like, I feel like it was gifted to me. Like, I really do.
It's not silly at all. It completely makes sense, especially as a writer coming into this journey to create a piece of work that was given to you fully formed and ready to produce. That is beautiful. Absolutely.
I'm so glad you get it. Thank you. Thank you for not making me feel like I'm totally off the deep end, my friend. Thank you.
Believe it or not, I think every author actually understands exactly what you're talking about, and every aspiring author understands the concept. Sometimes I describe it as it's not really my story. I take dictations from somewhere else, and you just put it on the page. So
Totally.
that connection with the words that has a very different meaning. And my family laughs at me because we're doing audiobooks now. And I was like, I wrote that? It's like, don't you remember? It's like, not really. No,
Love that. You're like, I am brilliant, though, by the way. Did anybody see how brilliant I am?
It becomes a strange moment. We're literally a funnel for this information to come through. So when it comes out at the end of it, you're like, oh, that was really good. Wait, I wrote that? Really? Oh, thank you, God. You got that.
And I think that's also the thing that like kind of also made me brave about this. There were definitely like situations where like the main character doesn't do the right thing all the time. She screws up. I don't think anybody wants to be like, well, yeah, that main character is just like me, somebody who screws up. But on the other hand, like everybody screws up. So it was like really freeing for me to be able to be like, okay, this is who she is. And sometimes we love her and sometimes we want to shake her and sometimes we want to sit her down and have a little conversation. So let's do that. Like you said, because it felt gifted to me, I did feel a lot more like, nope, I've got to be really, really raw about this. I've got to be really real because I'm not going to change something that was already, it impacted me enough that I had to write it. So if I had to write it, then that's the way it has to be.
I love it. It is that mission to come up with the words and be real to it and be true to the story.
Yeah.
Besides how you feel. Because every once in a while we want to be like, I really don't want to say that because I don't know what you're going to get out of it. If it's a story, then you got to tell the story.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Okay, madam, I have a question. What
Please.
advice would you give a filmmaker or aspiring author who's trying to get this huge idea they have in their head into paper? What advice would you tell them?
So if you're trying to distill like a big idea, I would say find out where it connects to you. Like if you have an idea about like a monster in space that like we all live inside or something like that, and like really just like a giant space bear and we're all just skin cells or something like that. Cool idea. You can have it, by the way. It just came to me. It's yours. But like, cool idea. But like, why do we care? If we can't see this big bear floating in the sky, like, why do we give a shit if we're a skin cell or not? We don't. So find the way that it connects to you. Why would you care that there was this thing, this big idea that you have? Like, what's the thing that's small? What's the thing that's human that can help you take that big idea and share it in a way that feels relatable? So I think that's the key to figuring out like what a story is really about. I always tell people if you don't have a reason to write, and the reason doesn't have to be huge, it can be tiny, it can be as simple as just connecting to somebody else. But like If you don't have a reason to write, then there's no reason to write. So find your reason, and then your story is going to end up coming down anyway, because once you ground it, once you find the character and the reason for it, the rest of it, it manifests itself because you know how to get there now. You know why you're going.
I like the fact, find your reason, find your why, and then things will come together. Sometimes I think we're trying to do it backwards. We're trying to make something and then figure out the why.
Right. I think that's a really good point. We do it backwards a lot, don't we? Yeah.
Then we end up frustrated. We're all like, oh, this didn't work out.
Yep, that's when they go in the dead thought pile. Like, as soon as I do something like that, I'm like, oh, cool, so this story is screwed up forever. In the trash. Like, in the trash. It crashed. You guys couldn't see that, but I crumpled up a paper imaginarily and threw it in the trash can.
The fact that you have no issues discarding this idea as quickly as they go bad is amazing to me. Because some people just hold on to it. It's like, I can make it work. I'm like,
oh my God, can I change my advice then? Throw those away. Like, throw those away. You don't need those cluttered up notebooks of dead end ideas. You stopped writing them because they were dead end ideas. Throw them away. It's like keeping pizza boxes in your house when they're empty. There is no point to them anymore.
People need to remember that. Stop holding on to these things.
Right.
I know a lot of young authors, like, I've been working on this for a while. It's like, is it going anywhere? It's like, I'm going to make it. I'm like, oh, okay then.
Yep. Well, and I think we all have one of those. You know, I think our first one is kind of always like that, where we have to retool it and work it again and retool it and work it again. I mean, I wrote the first draft of my first movie 28 times. No shit. Like, no kidding. Yeah. Before it sold. I literally rewrote it 28 times before it sold. But it did sell. And it ended up being like a really great script. It is nothing like the first draft of it. So if you're going to mine that cave, then make sure there's still shit in there to get to. Because that's the thing. Like, if you have like a magic pizza box that keeps regenerating your pizza, then like, cool, man. But like, I think you get one of those, and I think it's your first one. And I think after you get it right, you throw it away.
Don't hold on to this. It's not going to work again.
No, because it's just the way you learn. Like, you have to learn, you know, and it does take writing and rewriting. And I know that's something no new writer wants to hear, that like you're going to end up doing a bunch of drafts of something. No one ever wants to hear that. They're always like, oh, not me. I'm the one who doesn't have to do a bunch of drafts. But I'm going to tell you right now, you do a bunch of drafts once and you can write a freaking book in 3.5 months, okay? Do a bunch of drafts once, you can write a movie in 7 days. You got to do the work sometime. You're either going to do it all at once or you're going to do it for the rest of your life. It's up to you.
You're going to pay the piper someplace and you're going to pay it. Just decide where you're going to pay it.
Exactly. Ooh. Dues.
My brother put it really well. It's like, I said, I need to pay my dues. Like, good, they're yours. Figured out how you're going to pay them. And I'm like, that is true.
That is true.
You pay them however you want, but you still got to pay them.
That's
and
exactly
you still you should get better at it. That's amazing.
Yeah, you're exactly right.
This has been so much fun. I could talk to you forever. We're going to switch gears.
Okay.
Are you waiting for a lightning round?
Oh, yes, I think. I mean, I'm mostly awake. Let's do this.
Let's do this.
Okay.
And since we were just talking about pizza, this is perfect. I was like, I didn't even plan that. Deep dish or thin crust?
Thin crust.
Nice. Apple cider or pumpkin spice?
Apple cider.
Knight or pirate?
Ooh, pirate. I mean, yo ho ho. Let's do that. I'm all about the peg leg and the parrot. Like, yes, please. Thank you.
We're going to switch it up this one. If you could be any Disney villain, who would you be?
Maleficent.
Why?
Because she's awesome. And she can turn into a dragon. And she is secretly the coolest character Disney's ever come up with. Because she's like the only one who embraces the fact that she's evil and she loves it.
Nice. Here's our last one. If you had a warning label, what would that label be?
Warning, has no off switch.
It's a perfect one. I love it. So, Madame, where can our listeners find you? Where can they find the book? Tell us about it.
Thank you for asking. So Whispers has a website. It's called whispersbooks.com. So it's whispers with an S, books with an S.com. And there's all kinds of cool stuff on there, including some like one of a kind items you can only get. They're limited items. I think we have probably like 20 left. We had 100. They're mystery box items. It's a clue that comes with the book. So that's kind of awesome. And then on Amazon, you can get the book. You can also request it from your local library. You can get a hardback on Ingram Spark. We also have the paperback on Amazon, the Kindle on Amazon.
Yes, everything's coming together. This is so exciting.
Thank you. It's been really great.
It has been such a pleasure and such an honor to have you on this show. Do you have any closing comments for us?
Well, no, you're just amazing. Thank you so much for having me on your show. This has been so much fun. You're wonderful. I'll stay up till 6 a.m. for you anytime. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. You
just need to tell us when the next book is coming, because we want to hear how the journey is coming, what the next installment is. It is truly an amazing pleasure to have you. I am so excited that you are ruling not just the film world, because we need more women in there, but that you took a chance at writing, and you took a chance of bringing us a fabulous story. So we love it.
Thank you.
It's been a blast. And to our listeners, give this episode a like, share it, give us a review, share it with everybody. Let's continue to grow this community together, and we'll see you again next week for another passionate author. Bye.
Bye.